Walpole Film Festival started in 2003 as one of the first high school film festivals in the country. The program has been recognized nationally as a model for creativity and collaboration in the classroom. Students in the program are required to follow each step in modern independent digital filmmaking. This includes screenwriting, acting, art direction, shooting on digital cameras, editing on professional software, and composing original music. The festival culminates each year with a red carpet ceremony that celebrates the achievements of each crew. To learn more about this year's Walpole Film Festival and how to become a sponsor, please visit our website, walpolefilmfestival.com. Thank you and enjoy the movie.
People don't like the word feminism because they feel like it's a really strong word.
Nervous to call myself a feminist because I thought that other people would think that I was an angry person.
Certainly we live in a world in which feminism is vilified, is mocked.
There is a snark surrounding the feminist club.
That's where I fail to see the purpose in movements such as feminism.
There is such stigma around the word feminism.
I think it would be a negative connotation.
That it's an anti-male movement.
Not necessarily productive.
Sometimes feminists take it media's portrayal
separate into two groups, feminists versus anti-feminists.
If you are a feminist, you don't like feminism.
Real fear from people.
Feminism.
Feminism is the belief in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes, while also taking into consideration gender, sexuality, and race.
Equality for the sexes, for women and men.
That gender should not be determinative of a person's life chances.
People, not just women, but male and female, supporting the rights of women and supporting the rights of men and women to be equal in society.
When we're defining feminism in modern terms, I think there needs to be a deeper understanding that the word equal doesn't necessarily mean that men and women are the same. I think men and women aren't the same. We have biological differences, cultural and societal differences that don't necessarily make one better than the other, but it's just a factor in how we treat one another.
People, when they talk about feminism, talk about it as something they believe in as a concept. Equality is a good thing between genders, but they also really have an averse reaction to that word.
Certainly we live in a world in which feminism is vilified, is mocked, but I've never hesitated. I've embraced feminism. It's the work I do. I just came from the Women's March in New York this weekend. It's my life.
Like, I've been called a feminazi before, and I think most people don't see feminism as being equality for all, and they see it more of like a women movement, and like women are greater than men, and that's just like not the case.
I see positive in its initial definition, and especially when thinking of the history of feminism. I think that there's been a lot of great strides towards equality between men and women. But more recently, I view it in a more negative connotation in a pursuit of privilege.
I think that whenever you add an IST to the end of something, or whenever you have to take a stand, I think so many people in our culture think you have to be one or the other, and you can never just be in the middle, or you just can never be okay with not being anything.
If you're a male, then I think it's threatening because the patriarchy is often built upon the belief that men should have more power than women. So if you then approach this tradition and say, let's have women have the same amount of power as men, then even though you were talking about equality, you are taking power away from men who have predominantly had more power.
People in the club make it out of hand with saying like, oh, we hate men and stuff like that, and I understand why people wouldn't want to be a part of a movement that says they hate men.
I feel like people don't want to say that they're a feminist because of the label that it's gotten and like the connotation that's gotten, like the negative one. So they're kind of like afraid to like come out and say it. And a lot of men are like,
oh, I can't be a feminist because I'm not a girl, but like you can, because it's like it could be your mother or your sister or like your wife. You need to like support women and stuff.
One of the main reasons for that people are kind of having this negative connotation towards feminism is the rise of mass media. I think just when we're being bombarded with these images of radical ideas and them being labeled as like feminazis and things like that with these really strong negative connotations, I think it has kind of degraded the true purpose of feminism, which is to spark an open and honest conversation, not a hateful conversation.
The idea that people aren't supportive of full equality is confusing to me, because I just don't see this as being an issue that is that complicated.
I remember in high school specifically being nervous to call myself a feminist because I thought that other people would think that I was an angry person and that I was difficult to get along with and that I wasn't fun in general, and I think I am all of those things still.
I used to not say that I was a feminist because I was so worried about what people would think about me, and I'm kind of ashamed about it now because I shouldn't have felt that way.
To be walking down the halls and hear degrading comments or belittling comments, it's really fear-invoking. I think it has definitely persuaded me to remain quiet in situations that I would rather be strong enough to speak my voice.
I think that a lot of the perceptions of feminism are irrationally negative, and I just think that with the media being so prevalent today, I think that there's a lot of exaggeration of everything, including the perception of feminism.
There's also real fear from people about what does feminism mean and like what do they have to lose if we do have gender equality? What does it mean if the distribution of labor looks differently in our homes?
I've hesitated to define myself as a feminist before, not because of what other people think, but because I'm not even sure if I know what it means. And I think that in the bigger picture of things, that is not such a good thing, because I feel like people should know exactly what that term is by now, and they don't.
Women make up a very large portion of the school, and so many things that I've observed in the past that have perpetuated gender inequality, I feel like we needed a space where students can voice their opinions as well as make actions within the school that benefit them. Last year, especially at the beginning of 2018, there was a lot of arguments over feminism on social media, mainly Instagram, and I thought it got too out of hand. So we decided that maybe we should take the discussion to a more physical discussion rather than a cyber discussion.
The kids that have been involved, it's generally a positive thing for them, whether it's they came to a meeting once and we were just chatting, whether we were trying to do something like meet a bigger goal, whether we're working with other clubs. I think those kids have a generally positive attitude about it. That being said, there is a snark surrounding the feminist club. I think when we come on the morning announcements, sometimes kids roll their eyes.
I feel like having clubs that promote division in any regard in the school system is a negative thing. I think that a feminism club, what that does is it turns the school into feminist versus anti-feminist. Clubs that promote any identity besides your identity as a student and your identity as American is extremely divisive, and so personally I would not support any clubs of those kinds.
Whether the feminist club is 2 people or 100 people, I think it's beneficial because it gives people a platform to talk about issues that affect us rather than sitting in silence.
I think the Feminism Club is a very positive thing in our school because I think there's a good number of people in the school who consider themselves feminists. It's a good place for them to come together and kind of talk about the issues, not just in our school, but in the world today about feminism.
We supplied free tampons and pads and other female accessories in the girls' bathrooms because there aren't free sanitary products in the bathrooms. They are available in the nurse's office, but they're not available directly in the bathrooms. We put them in the morning, around like 7 before school had started. And around 2:05, I got a text message with a picture of the toilet, and it was a box that said, "From the Feminism Club, take one if you need it, leave one if you can." The box was like perched on the toilet, and it had all the supplies inside the toilet, like clogging the toilet. It happened in 2 different bathrooms. I was in anatomy, and I got another text message from the same person with a picture of the English wing bathroom, and it had the same thing. The box was thrown into the toilet, and the materials were clogged in the toilet. And throughout those 2 days and the rest of that week, a lot of people who weren't even in the club were posting on their accounts, on their Finstas mainly, about how it's so sad that we can't even have such a simple thing that girls need because of how controversial feminism is.
All of that goes on in high school, I think, makes it even harder for young women in high school to resist the kinds of harassment and everyday sexism that occurs.
When they're like, oh, I need someone strong to help me lift this. I need a strong boy to help me lift this. I feel that kind of discounts the strength of women, like physically, and that definitely needs to be touched upon.
For girls, yes, it portrays them as weak, and then for boys, I think it can be harmful in that it is painting this picture of masculinity that some boys simply don't want to or can't live up to, and so I think it can be discriminatory against both boys and girls in that regard.
I've also had heavy boxes and items taken out of my hands, which personally I find annoying because I'm a thrower for track, so all I do is lift.
So the first week of school was when I was supposed to like start practicing with the team, the freshman team, and I remember I was walking down to like the locker room and stuff with my friend Abby, and she had to like force me to keep walking because I was so nervous that they were gonna like not like me, or they were gonna like be mean to me, or just like not even just be mean to me, just like isolate me and not talk to me because I was like a girl. But then like literally the first practice I was there, within 10 minutes I was like friends with all of them, and they were all just treating me like I was like one of the guys.
In gym class, for example, the fact that when it's really hot, a boy can wear a tank top with his muscles showing and it's really cropped at the sides, but if a girl wore a tank top, it'd be too revealing because she has boobs on her chest.
I've had people make comments about my gender, even to my little brother on the team. They said that I couldn't work certain machines because I'm a scouter. Scouting is a group on the team that creates data, and it's predominantly female, so I had to make the assumption there that this isn't about my role in the team, it's about my gender.
Man up, don't be a pussy, grow some balls, like things like that perpetuate certain behaviors.
Stereotyping is so common because there is often truth to it, and we assign stereotypes so often in high school based on gender. And those are both positive and negative stereotypes, this idea that girls are better students than boys, right? That stereotype, well, that's damaging both to girls and boys. And so we discriminate constantly, and it has to do a lot with norms, like things that we take for granted, and that happens every day. And then, of course, it will happen in the classroom because the classroom's just a microcosm of society.
I went into Boston with, I think, like 4 friends. And it was the summer, it was hot, it was like 80 degrees. And I was wearing like a high-waisted pair of shorts, and not a crop top, but a shirt that like kind of showed my stomach a little bit. Keep in mind, it's like 80 degrees. And we were walking towards the State House, and all of a sudden a man like walked up from behind me and was like, "Girl, darling, what are you doing wearing that shirt? Like, even though it's hot, we don't want you to disrespect your body like that." I'm like, I'm sweating. It's just a shirt and it's just shorts. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And later on in that day, I remember we were walking to Primark, and I was catcalled 3 times, and my friends were also catcalled. And it just made me realize that if I did that to a man, it would just be so wrong. You wouldn't expect it, but it's almost expected that that was going to happen to me.
I do believe that in cases such as rape, which is something that is clearly a crime that affects women predominantly to the extreme and not so much as of males, So that's definitely where I see that feminists have a huge point and definitely have some ground to cover in order to restore complete equality between the sexes.
When I first started teaching, so 10 plus years ago, I was a student teacher, 21 years old, teaching a senior class that was small. I think it was about 16 kids. Ended up being predominantly male. I think it was like 13 boys, senior boys, and 3 girls. I felt so proud of everything I'd done and what we'd accomplished, both in terms of forming relationships and also having them understand the material. And then I came to learn that a majority of those students were on the football team, and the football coach at the beginning of the year had totally read them the riot act and said, don't you misbehave at all for this woman, and you sit when she tells you to sit and you stand when she tells you to stand. And I felt so humiliated by the fact that this coach had felt the need to say that to these kids purely because I was a woman. Like, that would not have happened, I would bet money on it, if I had been a man.
One of the courses I took in art school was called Women in Art. The teacher went over this group called the Guerrilla Girls, which is a group of famous artists who go in disguise with gorilla masks and try to push the feminist, I guess you can call it, agenda. At my college, the Guerrilla Girls actually came and gave a lecture. And it was pretty crazy because you knew they were famous. It's almost as if Beyonce came to your school to speak to you, but she was wearing a gorilla mask. They came down the aisles and they threw bananas at us, and they literally took us through art history from the beginning to the end of all these women artists who were extremely talented and really had to struggle to get their artwork to bring to light, but never ended up as famous because they were women. And it was just incredible because the work was better than Da Vinci's, was better than Rembrandt, was better than Van Gogh's, was better than all these big-time artists that were white males.
I've been sexually harassed at work. I've heard awful, awful things being said in the halls of the school. If I'm walking alone in a parking garage, I have my keys in one hand as a makeshift weapon, and I have my phone in the other, ready to call a parent or a friend if I'm ever unsafe. So I think in a way it's always on my mind, and that's kind of really brought feminism to light on me about how impactful this is in our everyday lives.
If everything is blamed like, oh, the patriarchy is oppressive to women, but in reality, like, this is true in history, but it was men that decided that women need equal rights. So I think just categorizing everything as being, men's faults as opposed to the views of those men individually, I think it needs to be addressed that way.
People fought to get the vote. Right? It didn't just happen. Women died. Women were jailed, women were beaten, women were force-fed. So I think, number one, know our history. Know the foremothers that we all stand on the shoulders of. I think that's enormously important. I think what I was saying before about refusing the stigma, embracing feminism. Look, if every young woman embraced feminism, of course I'm a feminist, and I don't want to associate with anyone who isn't. If all women did that, think how different the world would be.
The goal for the women's movement is not to have a singular experience or a singular agenda necessarily, but it's to be invested in each other's agendas also, even when it doesn't necessarily immediately perhaps benefit you, because our liberation is tied in each other's liberation.
This isn't all about me, this isn't all about us in this high school, this is all about us in America. There are millions of girls who don't even have access to education, and their lives basically end when they're like 14 or 15 years old because their life is predetermined for them because they're a woman and they don't have choices. So I think sometimes we need to take a step back and realize that this isn't all about us. This is a fight not just for us here in America, but for people in poor countries who have no options in their lives.
Don't let people who are anti-feminists tell you what feminism is. Because if you're listening to them, you're not listening to me as a person who is a feminist and as a person who knows and is above the media's portrayal of what feminism is.
There's definitely a stigma behind the word feminist because, again, it just gives the illusion that it's such a strong word and that you have to have a very strong point of view, when it really, all it just means for me is that you agree that everything should be equalized, and you agree that at some point in history we were doing it wrong. To completely deny the fact that there's not a power struggle going on between the sexes is just, I think, ignorant.
So while the word feminism is not accepted, equality and fairness is. And I think that's one of the really frustrating parts about this conversation. We get stuck on that word. And it seems like as a society, we cannot get beyond it.